I'm John McLaughlin.
Cindy Toll.
Ken Basinger.
Christina Robertson Gardner.
Is there any public comment on items not listed on the agenda? Okay. We're going to postpone elections until next month when we have all of us here. Number 3. So we're going to start with the next item on the agenda for the board meeting. It's a public hearing, HR 10-11, the Kenema Park. The applicant is seeking approval for the expansion of the Kenema Park. Because it's a public hearing, I have to read an opening statement. We'll now commence the public hearing on agenda item 10-11, a request for approval of expansion of Kenema Park. The criteria for approval of a land use action are contained in Chapter 17 of the Oregon Municipal Code. The proposed development must comply with applicable provisions contained in the City of Oregon City Comprehensive Plan. Generally, unless otherwise noted, if a request is found to be consistent with the municipal code, it is considered consistent with a comprehensive plan. If you wish to participate in this hearing, including challenges for bias or conflict of interest, you must complete the sign-in form located on the table at the front of the room and deliver it to staff. Please do so immediately. The chair will only recognize those who have submitted completed forms. Testimony will be taken in the following order: applicant, testimony in favor, testimony in opposition, rebuttal by the applicant. When recognized by the chair, please come forward to the podium, give your name, address, and make your statement. All testimony, arguments, and evidence presented regarding this request must be directed toward the applicable criteria or other criteria in this plan or land use regulation which the person believes to apply to the decision. Please address only the applicable criteria for the decision. Please do not repeat testimony. If you wish, you may choose merely to agree with the previous speaker's statement. An issue which may be the basis for an appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals shall be raised not later than the close of the record at or following the final evidentiary hearing. Such issues shall be raised and accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the Commission and the parties an adequate opportunity to respond to each issue. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision makers and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes the appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of persons to participate in the public hearing, either orally or in writing, precludes that person's right of appeal to the City Council or LUBA. Written testimony submitted prior to the hearing constitutes participation in the hearing. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues related to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the decision maker to respond to the issues precludes an action for damages in the circuit court. Prior to the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may request an opportunity to present additional evidence, arguments, or testimony regarding the application. Commission shall grant such request by continuing the public hearing pursuant to the standards contained in ORS 197.763. Do any of the board members have a conflict of interest or ex-party contact regarding this application?
No.
Nope. No. Who has visited the site?
I have visited the site.
I've seen it.
I have thrown a frisbee at the site.
Okay. We'll turn this over to staff.
Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. This is HR 10-11, and this is in concert with the site plan SP 10-19, which will be under staff approval. The CV will just be looking at this proposal in regards to historic appropriateness. The full development review and the traditional development conditions will be contained in SP 10-19. The project consists of a design and construction of renovations to and expansion of the existing Kenema Children's Park, plus the vacation of Paquette Street right-of-way, improve the approximately 1 acre parcel of the adjacent 38 acre Metro-owned Kenema Bluff Natural Area, and the City of Oregon City will permanently maintain the entire new Kenema Neighborhood Park. The expanded park will be about 1.5 acres and will create an educational gateway to the Kenema Bluff Natural Area. You can see from the zoning, the two large parcels in purple are the large parcels on the Metro, the 38 acre Kenema Bluff area. The parcels in red are owned partly by Metro and by the city, and this is a better view of it. The outline in black shows the park in the full extent after development, and it's partially the Kenema property and partially the vacated Paquette Street and some of the original Kenema Park, Children's Park. These are some views at the park looking, I guess technically it's looking east, even though we all want to think it's north. Down 4th Avenue, the park is on your left. This is just farther down the street, or up the street, excuse me. Park is on your left. This is looking north. You can see the existing park, and far in the distance you can see the Abernathy Bridge on 205, just to give you some context. The gazebo pavilion was actually approved by the Historic Review Board in 2001, so that's a new addition. But for the most part, it's some blacktop and some existing children's equipment. This is looking west towards the Kenema Bluff area. This is at the end of 4th Street as it transitions to the property owned by Metro. This is looking south on the property owned by Metro. These houses, this is looking towards 4th Avenue, excuse me, on the park proper. Let's see, once again, we're looking south towards the edge. Behind me would be the cliffside. So the existing conditions of the park, you'll see the existing gazebo and basketball court with some play equipment. Shows the proposed plan, and I can let the applicant go a little more detailed, but for the most part it's more formalization. It has some new paths, and it's slightly larger, peaking in the Kenema Bluffs area. The parking stalls are more formalized and will be paved. They will be approximately in the same location, a little bit bigger, but they are inside the 4th Avenue right-of-way, and they will not be curbed. It will just be wheel stops. These are some of the details of the park infrastructure. Kind of simple, natural park elements. The ADA accessible bathroom is cedar cladded siding with a brown metal shed roof, and some examples of interpretive signs. Oops. And here's an example of our existing city standard park entry sign and Metro standard park entry sign. Just briefly, some of the findings I have contained in the staff report. I won't go through it in detail, but for the most part, this proposed park improvements are designed to fit within the historic, aesthetic, and cultural heritage of the site. Neutral colors have been chosen for furnishing and play equipment to blend in with the landscape. Additionally, site improvements are designed with minimal use of impervious surface, and new native plantings will complement the existing plants. The proposed park improvements will remain within the character of the existing park and neighborhood. Proposed pavements will be kept to minimum and will be curbless to fit within the current context of the Kenema National Historic District. I actually really do like the details featured. They're not replicating historic elements that are not there. Kenema does not have, existing historic utilities. We don't have existing site utility poles. It is a natural area, and so I do like their kind of restrained approach, using as much as they can neutral colors, natural materials to the extent practicable. These elements are meant to just kind of visually go away and let the actual park property speak for itself, and not make an element out of a park piece that kind of would never want to convey a false sense of history. And so I do like their approach in this aspect. The conditions of approval, number one, it's subject to the development requirements of SP 1019, which will be released soon after this hearing. Two, this was also added during the Promenade project, and I kind of like it as a standard condition. Staff may approve alterations to the location and number of park-built elements, such as signs, benches, trash receptacles, and play equipment. Another location is pursued by the city and the community. The revised locations must meet the same intent and design as the previous approvals. Notice by staff to the neighborhood association will be required prior to moving the location of any of the proposed elements. Sometimes, as you get out and build something, it makes more sense to slightly move an element, or if you have more money and there's an extra bench. I want to give the Parks Department an ability to kind of move some of the chess pieces around if it becomes necessary as the development moves forward, and not have to hold up construction and have to go back to the board if it was unclear exactly what was approved. So I added that condition. So it would be, if trash receptacle was planned here and it was moved slightly to another location, if 3 benches were, put in rather than 2, those kind of ideas. Nothing outside of the general intent of what's being proposed tonight, but it does allow them to move forward if things change. Or if a new bench is added in 2 years, it could be done under this approval. And number 3, which I think is specific to the Historic Review Board, this review does not include any proposed curbing or sidewalks along 4th Avenue. Any improvements to 4th Avenue that involve curbing or sidewalks will require additional historic review. Extension to 4th Avenue pavement, so there'll be if they added onto the pavement to make it slightly wider, to allow for pedestrian use / connection, is exempt from this condition and may be constructed without further historic review. There's still a little bit of uncertainty about what kind of pedestrian connections under the site plan design review we're going to require this park to adopt. Technically, they're required to upgrade their frontage. A lot of their frontage is just not appropriate for upgrade. There's a large rock mound. There's some very tight existing conditions, but there is an overall requirement in the city code to make pedestrian connections when appropriate. And so what I'd like what this recommendation for condition allows is some general widening of 4th Avenue as a street to allow for pedestrian, a little bit wider to allow on, not, probably would never even get a fog line or anything for walking, but slightly bigger, but does not entail sidewalks or curbing. All that would come back to the board if there was anything, larger for development required. And I have Kurt Lango and Scott Archer here for the applicant, and I'm open for any questions you may have.
What I failed to mention, or I should have mentioned, was with public testimony. I think we can allow up to 15 minutes for the applicant, 5 minutes for a representative of a recognized neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization, and 3 minutes for individuals. Are you on the clock? We'll be very strict to that. You don't have to take all of the time, but you're not going to be able to take any more than that. So, anyway.
Do you have any questions for myself as staff before I move on to the applicant?
I don't.
And do you want to use any of the photos there?
If you could state your name and address, and then once you do that, we'll start the shot clock.
Good evening. I'm Scott Archer. I'm the city's community services director. So my address is, I work at City Hall, and I'm actually the department director that oversees, as a number of my responsibilities includes parks management and parks development. So this is my department's project, and this is Kurt Lango. Kurt is with Lango Hansen Landscape Architects. He's our lead landscape architect, and Heidi Baker from his firm is also here as well. So I'm just here mostly to just represent the department and answer any questions. Kurt is our technical guy, so if you have any other comments about the design, and then again, we'll be happy to answer your questions.
I would like to mention that actually the process of coming up with the master plan for Kenema Park began back in 2004. So it has been quite some time. We did a big neighborhood outreach then, and the project went on hold for a little while, and then last year we submitted it to the State Parks Department for a grant, and we were successful in that grant application, which was really good news. And then we revisited with the neighbors, and they had some good comments. We made some subtle changes to the master plan. So we're hopeful for construction this year of the park. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
You said the process started in 2004?
Yeah.
That's when did it actually start then, or was it? That's when the master plan was originally adopted in 04. That's when the park master plan was concluded and adopted. I don't know how
We
long.
did a presentation for the city commission a couple of months ago here, and you had a big layout of the project. I think it would be helpful if you showed that.
Went through
I've
that.
seen it, but I don't think the other members have.
How do I get that?
It's on here.
Yeah, is there a plan? Other way.
After all the pictures, I think.
We can use the.
Um,
There you go. You can use this as a point.
okay,
It's on the screens and it'll
As you know, this is 4th Avenue right here, and during the planning process, I think we heard a number of things from the neighbors. First of all, was to really keep the character of the park very similar to what it is right now, really respect the history, and if there's opportunities to really kind of tell the story of Kenema, then we should take advantage of that. So really, this whole kind of center area will remain lawn. It's lawn right now. It's in fact it's slightly expanded. So if you're throwing a frisbee, I think you might be able to throw it a little bit farther right now. There's an existing basketball court that you saw in the photos, and we have actually kind of reoriented that to make it a little bit more efficient to kind of work with its surroundings. There'll be a new drinking fountain right next to that, and bike racks. Right now, if you want to park in that area, you kind of park halfway in the gravel and halfway on the grass. So we felt it was important to really kind of create a kind of a standard parking area. As Christina mentioned, there's no curves, just curb stops, and so we'll have 8 parking spaces right there. The other thing that was really important to the neighbors was to have a walking loop. So that kind of curved pathway that you see, it's half concrete, and then over towards my left is a gravel path, which is that kind of dark line right there. We have a new play areas. We worked a lot with the neighbors on what the character is of those. Those will all be very muted tones, dark bronze, green colors. And I think one thing that was, I think, briefly mentioned, but I think is very important, is that Metro has been a partner throughout this process. And not only thinking about this in terms of a park and open space, but how does it transition into this more kind of natural area? So we'll have both signage that relates to the natural area, but we'll also have interpretive signage that relates to the cultural history of the park. So I think that kind of sums up, I think, in general, kind of the master plan.
When you talk about input from the neighbors, you're talking about meetings with the Kenema Neighborhood Association.
Yes.
And if you're starting this summer, when do you think it'd be done? Winter time?
Well, we're hopeful that we can be done this coming fall. We're always trying to get it done before the winter ends in October, and so I think that's the goal.
Got it. Well, that's kind of cool.
Is that gazebo the same one, or are you building it?
You know, it is the same one, and that's the one that was approved prior with a historical review.
Maybe a little jazzed up or something, or
It would be nice to get a fresh coat of paint on there.
Are you going to be adding any trees? Removing any trees?
Yeah. There's that's a really good question because there are a couple trees that we're removing, but they're declining. We're not removing any healthy trees. In fact, there's a couple of pine trees which you kind of see in the middle of the site. Look at my cursor to work. There we go. Right there.
Okay.
So we made a really concerted effort to make sure that we weren't impacting those trees. There's also some really wonderful old oak trees along the side, really big oak tree over here. Out of this,
Look back for disease.
I think these are all on Metro property,
Oh, okay.
and I don't know if they had an arborist out there, but they all appear to be in very healthy condition. We will be adding some new trees over in this area, over in here.
Are those ones that are indicated?
Um,
The additions?
Yeah, I do not know if they're actually kind of shown on this this plan right here. Yeah. So there are 4 or 5 trees that we'll be adding over in that area. We want.
Like a sloped area, is that what those lines mean?
Yes. Yeah. And there are neighbors then, to the east, right there. So.
What is the fence along the cliff?
It's an existing chain link fence. And so that's going to remain as part of this project. We won't be impacting that at all. I think there is desire maybe sometime in the future that could be changed, but at this point we really don't have the budget to do that.
Okay. Anybody else have any other questions?
As I understand it, the restroom is not going to be constructed now. Just rough plumbed, or where did that end up?
Well, I'll answer that one. It wasn't originally planned. Actually, we heard pretty strongly from the neighborhood that they'd really like to have a restroom in this site. We have it's on this plan, isn't it?
Yeah.
You point to it?
Yeah, sure. It's right
So,
here.
Oh,
It's being indicated in all of our proposed site plans so that we can receive approval for that and hope that we can. I guess to cut to the chase, the answer, we're hopeful to put that in this phase of construction, but it's going to depend on funding. We are. It was not in our original budget. But the neighborhood expressed a really strong desire to see if we could work out a way to get that in. And what we've done is kind of looked at some cost engineering, value engineering on some other parts of the park, and we think it's a pretty favorable bidding market, or it sure is right now. And I assume that when we bid this, it probably still will be. So we're kind of hoping that the numbers will work out. We're looking at bidding it as an alternate item where you don't include it as part of the base bid, but you bid it as an optional bid, and you get pricing so that if your base bid comes in better than you expect, and you've still got funding, then you can build it. So,
what if that doesn't happen? What's in the interim? Nothing? Outhouse?
Well, we've talked about it, honestly, for a 1.5 acre park in our park system, and it's pretty typical in a lot of urban park systems. You typically don't put in a restroom in a neighborhood park. I mean, the theory is a neighborhood park is a walk-to park. It's supposed to be close, but again, it's the community park, and the community has spoken very strongly that they'd give up some things to try to find a way to put in the restroom, and so we've really tried to work that out. So we have talked about. I'm pretty hopeful that we're going to be able to fund that, but if it doesn't work out, we've talked about maybe a temporary situation until we can fund that. So that's the best I can tell you right now. It really kind of depends on the bidding and how some of our funding comes out.
Anything else?
I have no further questions.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. Do you have any? No. kind of make it formal if you want to fill that out, and we'll,
Community Neighborhood Association.
if you're part of an association, you've got up to 5 minutes. Starting from when you
My name is Paul Ecker. I'm the land use chair of the Kenema Neighborhood Association. I was an active participant in the virtually all of the activities associated with the coming up with the final plan and review and the discussions within the neighborhood. We had a subcommittee that actively worked with Scott and our architects, and I would turn around and tell you that we have total agreement. We felt that we had great interaction. There was a lot of give and take along through the whole process. And all I can say is at this point, we're very happy. We're happy that the process was good, and we're happy that the neighborhood seemed to come together and are hoping that we can get this into the ground and started so that it will be completed as early as possible.
Thank you, Paul. You don't want to rebut that or anything? No. We don't have anybody opposed to it. Okay. If there's any other questions for staff from the board? No? No. Does staff have any other comments? Okay.
I move we approve HR 10-11, Kenema Park expansion.
There are conditions of approval stated on this.
Those are conditions of approval stated in the statute.
I'll second that.
Ms. Toll?
Aye.
Mr. Basinger?
Aye.
Chair McLaughlin?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Nice job.
All the best to you.
Yeah, before the snow flies this week. Okay. I have a question for Christina. For this next item, I do not have to read that again. Okay. Then the next item on the agenda is HR 11-01, 804 4th Avenue. Requesting approval for a new accessory building and alterations to a non-contributing structure in the Kenema National Register District. The applicant is also requesting a historic preservation incentive to allow for a reduced setback on the corner side yard for the proposed accessory building. Do any of the board members have a conflict of interest or ex-party contact regarding this application?
No.
None at all.
Who has visited the site?
I have visited the site.
Been there?
Been there and
Been
done.
around it.
In fact, I threw my frisbee in the park. That's where I ended up.
Never mind. I don't know. Okay. 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 Go ahead with staff.
All right. Thank you, Chair McLaughlin. I just want to let everyone know that it's been an interesting month. I've been working on HR 10-11 and HR 11-01. So I apologize if for some reason something gets in here that is right, but I don't think I've had that one before. This is HR 11-01. It's exterior alterations and the addition of a garage on a non-historic structure in the Kenema National Register District. And this is the first time this has come in front of the board as a public hearing, but about a year ago, the applicant, Representative Michael Dowd, came in front of the Historic Review Board as a design advice. So this is back as a public hearing.
Is this the advice we gave him?
Huh?
Is this the advice we gave him?
Yes.
What was the month?
I think it was October. Yeah, I think it.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think it was before your time.
Okay. The property is located at the intersection of Blanchard and 4th Avenue. It's a 1980 split entry house. You'll see the front elevation. It shows the corner looking up at Blanchard and Fourth, kind of the corner side. As you move up Blanchard, you see the side, and this is at the edge of the property looking back down again. And when we talk about kind of the large rock knoll and tree, you can see it in the photo. It's a very large rock outcropping, which is some of the reason why the preservation incentive was being requested. This is at the back edge of the property looking north down the street. You are on 4th Avenue looking west. Actually, the green at the top of the street is the park. To give you some context. This is the property, and the gentleman who owns property is here this evening, behind the subject property, and his property is off of Blanchard Street. This is Blanchard is moving farther south into the 5th place area outside of the National Register District boundaries. It's a small add-on subdivision from the 1970s and 80s, in the 1970s. Shows the existing conditions of the house and the contours. You'll see as existing there's a 2-car garage with a 2-car driveway on 4th Avenue. This is the proposed site plan. You'll see that the existing driveway is being reduced. One of the garage bays is being removed, and there'll be a 1-car garage on the front elevation.
Can you point to that, please?
Sure. This is showing the existing footprint of the house, and you'll see that in the slash mark, that is the asphalt being removed.
Okay.
This section up here is a new concrete pad being added for a front patio.
Okay.
On the side elevation,
Garages. Oh,
this
so
is
here.
the existing garage.
Oh, but you're adding another one back down here.
And so what the applicant is requesting to do is to reduce the width of the existing driveway to a 1-car width.
I see.
And then request an additional driveway, 1-car width driveway on the Blanchard elevation. And you'll see this is the addition. It has studio space and a 1-car garage space. This is 1-car garage. This is a studio. There's a pergola that's connecting to a new small rear kind of mudroom addition. Stairs will lead down to Blanchard Street.
What are the stairs? I'm sorry.
Right here.
Yeah. What are they?
Concrete.
Concrete.
This is showing existing conditions. This shows the proposed elevation. You'll see the removal of one of the garage doors into a
Banana door.
yeah, it's actually a French door.
Oh,
Correct.
there's 2 of them?
Mhm.
Okay, I got one.
And then this is the Blanchard elevation, and this is where you can see the stairs leading up. Right here, where you see my arrow is the pergola that's connecting the little mudroom addition.
So it's all open in there?
Yeah, so this is the pergola. This is not covered. And this is the new garage. This space right here is the studio space. This is the garage space. This is showing the other elevations. This kind of, if you were looking on the middle of the backyard, kind of a section through, this is what you would see. And then if you're at the far end of the property, this is what you'd see, the knoll would kind of be in the way from the adjoining property. This is the rear elevation, is what you see. This is the mudroom aspect, so if you were basically just standing at the pergola, underneath the pergola, this is what you see on the top. This is what you're seeing, let's see, I might have to ask the applicant. Oh, this is through the studio, and the bottom is at the edge of the property line. Recommended conditions of, approval. And I'll go through them a little bit in detail because there was a little bit of analysis for this one. The first one is I'm recommending approval of the preservation incentive, and I'll go back a little bit to show the site plan. As you recall, in Kenema, Kenema has 60-foot right-of-ways, but there is not 60-foot pavement. So oftentimes, an applicant does request a preservation incentive because the the distance back from the edge of pavement and the distance back to the property line are sometimes two very different things. In this situation, we also have the large knoll in the back. So if this was a flat property that did not have the tree in the knoll, you'd be moving the parcel back, and there may not be a need or a precedent. I think the applicant has a number of findings that make the case. One, the existing condition with the rock and the tree. Two, there's actually 23 feet from the edge of pavement to the building, so there's full ability for safe ingress and egress onto Blanchard. And third, the applicant has received approval by Nancy Krushauer, our Public Works Director and City Engineer, to have 2 driveways. And that letter is attached to your packet. And it was all based on kind of reducing the existing driveway on 4th Avenue.
Can I ask you, 23 feet from asphalt to property line, or 23 feet from asphalt to building?
Building.
So that includes that 6'9" off the property line.
Correct. So I guess the real condition of I have a car and I'm going to drive it into the driveway, conditions on the ground is the 23 feet.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the only thing I was thinking is if the city ever decides to improve that, they'll basically have 6'9", which on a preservation incentive would be normal for this district, I guess. What you're saying.
I think I'm kind of segregating the 2 things. One, for the Historic Review Board, is this a safety issue? I mean, sorry, is this a historically appropriate location? And I think in Kenema it would be. Kenema follows the built environment, not the property lines. And 2, on a staff level, I'm kind of deferring the safety issues and the long-term build out to our Public Works Director, because any dramatic change in the right-of-way will come back to the Historic Review Board.
But this house is in the district,
Correct.
but it's non-contributory.
Correct.
And this won't make it contributory. But
So-
nothing will.
Right. So the preservation incentives, basically, it's designed to allow new construction to be appropriate for the existing conditions and the context, rather than kind of an arbitrary setback that's required by code.
But this takes the place of a. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
Without having to blow out all that rock.
Right. Oh, and also, it does take the place of a variance,
Yeah,
because
that's
what
what
we're
I was
saying,
asking. Yeah.
it's
Quicker.
a type 3 hearing.
Yeah.
And whereas a variance, you're looking at hardship criteria, what the preservation incentive is saying, we see that this layout actually is the same or even more historically appropriate than what would have been allowed or required by the zoning. So what would have been required by the zoning would have been the setback farther. But that's usually in a situation where you don't have a 60-foot right-of-way and only 20 odd feet of pavement. So Kenema really is, it really gives you the ability to do something that it'd be nice to, more people have the ability, which is to look at the conditions on the ground.
And it would set precedent.
Well, what is this precedent? Because you are looking at each case based on the merits of its proposal and the context of each situation.
I see the rock.
Compared to variance,
hard.
correct.
Shit.
So it's not necessarily a hardship criteria for preservation incentive. You're saying, does the Historic Review Board believe that this addition is appropriate for the district, or even makes more appropriate sense than if you defaulted back to what the zoning allowed? And on accessory garages in Kenema and also McLaughlin, oftentimes the accessory garage, even at a corner elevation, was closer to the street. So on a staff level, I am recommending approval, contingent on the letter from our Public Works Director, which is allowing the second driveway. Let me go back to the conditions of approval. Second involves the right-of-way permit. That's, of course. The third I added. It looks from the applicant's submittal that they are meeting the 3 feet at the rear setback, but I just wanted to verify that as a condition of approval. I believe they meet it, but I wanted to add that in just in case if I was reading the staff the submitted application incorrectly. The board has the ability to allow buildings to go to the property line, but it gets complicated in building permits, so generally we like to defer to 3 foot as a general rule. And that's the rear setback. Number 4, this is regards to the pergola. In the city of Oregon City, we see a building being attached if there is a covered connection. And right now the applicant has proposed a pergola, which we don't consider to be a connection to a building. So with a pergola, this is considered an accessory building that is detached from the house. If the applicant was to put a covered breezeway, that changes our city code a little bit, and they would have to be asking for different preservation incentives. So this approval is contingent on them keeping the pergola uncovered, which they plan on doing, but once again, I wanted to reiterate that in writing. Number 5 and 6 and 7 go into more aesthetics. I'm going to go back to the elevation that speaks to that. I think the majority of the issues relating to this application are the Blanchard Street elevation and the impact the impact the new construction has on the historic district. When the applicant previously presented this to the historic review board, I don't think elevations to this level were presented, and footprint-wise, I think it made a lot of sense. And elevation-wise, I'm still recommending conditional approval, but I think there's some mitigation potentially needed. Modern architecture can be appropriate in a historic district, especially in this situation where you have an intrusive architectural style, a 1980s split entry home. I absolutely believe in what the architect was contending in their findings, which putting a new construction that met the design guidelines for new construction with a 10-12 roof pitch with a vernacular building, I don't think would have been appropriate. It would have might create a false sense of history. It would have been disjointed and would have, I don't think would have been appropriate for the lot. However, the question is, if it is modern architecture, is it to the level where it retains a secondary nature? You already have an existing intrusion building. Accessory buildings to this should create no more impact than is already there. So that's what do no more harm is kind of the look that I'm giving on a staff level. And some of the conditions that I see, and I've added, one, the amount of concrete that's added now with the stairs and the new foundation, I think could be pretty jarring and create more mass. The applicants do plan on having a pretty robust landscaping plan, but they're not at this time ready to submit it. They're still living in upstate New York and have not been able to sell their house. And so I propose a condition of approval, and I'll bring it back here and I'll read it, that I think meets the intent of what landscaping can do to minimize the impact of concrete, but giving them some flexibility so they don't have to design it now from 3,000 miles away, which is prior to obtaining a building certificate of approval. The applicant, certificate of occupancy, the applicant shall receive staff approval of a concept landscaping plan that utilizes native or historic plantings to soften the Blanchard Street elevation, specifically along the new stairs and concrete foundation. As it connects to the existing house, the plan should be designed to limit the amount of exposed concrete to the maximum extent practicable. Shrubs chosen to conceal the exposed concrete shall be installed on a minimum height of 2 feet. The landscaping related to this condition shall be installed within 6 months of receiving a certificate of occupancy, and failure to install the approved landscaping will result in code enforcement action. So I think that has passed our attorney's specificity requirements for conditions, but still allows the applicant to have some creativity and some time to design some mitigating landscaping. So my goal with that condition is, and I'll go back to this elevation, kind of down here where you see this exposed concrete here and along here and even down here, you can see a lot more plantings that are, shrubs that are 4 feet tall, and along here, suddenly you won't see this long linear mass. You'll see more vertical massing, and that's my goal, is to take this horizontal massing away by breaking it up with the landscaping and really making the concrete visually go away. I mean, you still have the stairs, but what can you do to visually conceal the rest of the foundation concrete? The next condition of approval relates to the height, which always relates to massing. And as proposed, it looks like this. Now I'm going to show you'll see this elevation. It shows the Fourth Avenue elevation, but behind it you'll slightly see the massing of the accessory building. And the question is, even at this section of Fourth Avenue, and knowing that Blanchard is sloped up, you're fighting those constraints whenever you're building an accessory building. That it's going to be bigger just based on its location. But I think requiring that it is no higher than the existing house will definitely go away to add and minimize a little bit of that massing issue, where you don't want it looming over the existing house on Fourth Avenue as you look up. It shouldn't become its own architectural element, even though it is higher, elevation-wise. So I have a condition of approval to ensure the proposed garage remains secondary in massing and more accessory in nature. The applicant shall reduce the height of the building to make the top of peak of the roof no higher than the peak of the house. And finally, this was a recommendation from Carrie Richter, our assistant attorney, who's also on the Portland Landmarks Commission, and I do agree with her. If you look right now, the barge board cap on the windows, I'm going to go back. If you look right here, these barge board caps right here are quite wide, and the question is, if you look at what exists architecturally in this split entry house, it's very minimal, and so she questioned if these large barge board caps would start to create an element that was too big and too imposing. And she recommended that it be reduced. And I had a conversation with the applicant's architect tonight, and I think he has some recommendations that could potentially be added into the condition of approval that might address some of her concerns and my concerns, but yet still meet the needs of the building structurally and the needs of the applicant. So the last condition do a little bit of how do we continue to make this architecturally and visually remain secondary in nature. I think some of it is painting, making sure that we don't have a painting trim, and maybe both the siding and the barge boards are the same color. That could also potentially make it visually go away. So right now, those are my 7 conditions of approval, recommending the preservation incentive and mitigations to the house. I'm recommending approval on the exterior alterations. Normally, those would be allowed under a staff approval, but it was so extensive that I felt that we needed to put the whole project together. And so you'll be also approving the exterior alterations to the non-historic house, and I'll add those there. And I'm open for any questions, and I know the applicant is here and can answer any questions you may have.
Do you know if the house color is going to change, or are they going to?
As far as I know, it's not. It's going to stay the same, and I'll let the applicant confirm that. I mean, it may not dramatically change. I don't know if they're going to put a new coat of paint on.
Other questions? No questions. Okay. We can hear from the applicant, and we can get the clock going. You've got up to 15 minutes. Don't have to take it all. Go ahead and state your name and your address, please.
I'm Mike Dowd from Dowd Architecture, 0753 Southwest Miles Street, Portland. Christina explained everything pretty well. I think I could talk more about the design, but I don't know that I really need to. The historic criteria were tough. I ended up writing quite a bit because the rules seem aimed at either doing entirely new houses in the historic district or in remodeling houses that are historic. So some of them didn't apply very well to this. And our main idea is to, and we had to work with the building that's there, and it wouldn't work to apply historical types of windows or materials to it. But we want to keep a quiet. We took sort of a quiet approach to this, and the landscaping is very important. And I told Christina that requirement, the condition of having the landscape plan is completely fine, because what it's aimed at of hiding views of some of the concrete and breaking up the facades is exactly what my clients want to do anyway. Actually, the stairs there aren't necessarily concrete. I might have mentioned that in what I wrote, but they could be railroad ties or something else too. I did do a couple sketches over the drawings that I can.
Exhibit 1.
They show the. I mean, it's sketchy because we don't have an exact landscape plan, but the elevations up there are deceiving because it's so blank, but it will be softened quite a bit with landscaping. And the color of the house, we have talked about that, doing maybe a dark charcoal color or something in the dark range, so that the house will recede and the landscaping will be more prominent. The pergola, we actually had hoped that the pergola could have a cover on it, and that it won't be attached to either the studio or the house, but the cover would be an almost flat, say, translucent glass or plexiglass that would just it would actually look exactly the same as this from the street, but if the city code doesn't allow it, we won't have it. But that was our hope, just for rain protection. I talked to Christina a little bit. I saw the staff report this afternoon, and the other conditions, one was the height of the studio. As it is, it's a little bit taller than the house, and it shows it poking above on the 4th Avenue elevation, but that's a elevation drawing. It really, because you're down below this, quite a bit below even the ground level of the house. So you would, even if the studio was several feet higher than it is, you would never see that from 4th Avenue.
It would have to be 20 feet tall to get this view.
Yeah, and I'm not.
I don't see
I'm not opposed at all to looking at lowering it some by changing the slope a little bit, but I told Christina my concern is that say if we were a little bit off, we based the drawings of the existing house on we had existing construction drawings of it, and if for some reason those were a little bit off and we ended up a few inches higher, or it turned out we had to drop the slope of the roof so much to keep it below the roof of the house, but then it started looking strange because the roof got flat. I'm a little worried about getting stuck further down if that was an absolute requirement. And then the other one was the barge board, which I actually, when we talked, I was thinking we were talking about the roof. But if it's the wood that's above the 3 windows there, that's where the header is that's supporting the roof rafters. So there's a limit to how narrow we could make that. We'd have to do it in steel and hide it in the wall, or.
Well, it's probably like a 4x6 or a 4x8 header going across it.
Yeah, we can. Well, it'll be whatever we need, and it wouldn't. but we don't have it engineered yet.
So
So,
how wide are those windows?
I'd have to look at the plans. They're probably about 5 feet wide each. So it may be, I mean, we won't make it, our idea is to have as much glass as possible, so we would make it as shallow as we can, but it's one where we can't just get rid of it. And we will, our intent is that that would be probably the same color or similar color to the siding, so it wouldn't be prominent. But I wouldn't want to promise that we'd get rid of it and then not be able to.
I mean, it's an aesthetic thing. When I look at the garage and I see what you're accomplishing, I just look across and it almost looks like the garage is half finished because you've got horizontal siding and then what could be stucco or something around the garage door. Is that what that is?
We're thinking of that being a gray cement panel.
Oh, gotcha.
And that's also, there's over the garage door, it shows up more in the sketch.
Right,
There's
the
a
anchor.
trellis, so then that's
the
where
trellis.
the vines of the trellis would go up, so
Yeah.
a lot of that would be hidden.
Well, and you can mitigate that concrete there by smooth coating it too until the plants mature. That would be pretty huge instead of seeing so much exposed concrete. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't see a problem I don't see a problem with the height of the roof in the back at all. I kind of see. I mean, I'm just talking to you. I kind of see what Carrie Richter's saying about the trim around the windows, but at the same time, I don't see it as an issue. It's kind of an element, in my opinion. I don't see it as a problem at all. I think with your header there, you're going to be anywhere from 4x8 on up to whatever you want it to be. You've got plenty of shear below it, so it doesn't matter. So I don't think that's going to be a really huge element. Yeah. And I think what you did on that drawing there, where you brought in the multiple windows on the front above the garage.
Oh, yeah, the ones over, over the
Yeah.
garage. Yeah.
I mean, it's a good element to try and tie around to the back.
Yeah, we actually changed those windows over the garage.
Yeah,
to the
these guys
door.
right here.
Yeah, I thought that looked better than what's up there.
No, that's right here. It got fixed cases.
And we also changed there's a pergola that's under the new bay window on the front
Oh, yeah.
that we changed the layout a little bit so that instead of, now up there's a post right in the middle, and we changed the spacing and got rid of the extension that goes over the front door, so it's centered under the bay and then it's open in the middle instead of having a post in the middle, so that it'll work better for, if there's a table, there's seating there.
What's the width between the house and the garage? Where the pergola's going. Do you know what that is?
I think it's about 10 feet.
So 10 feet, I'm not sure code, but obviously whatever stairs you're going to have a handrail in the middle or two on the side, or it's not drawn on here.
It's not, and I'm not sure they'll be at grade or close to at grade.
But not on this side. It's
No.
up here. So you got to have a handrail somewhere.
Yeah.
And that's got to be some kind of element.
And also because some of that's going over the property line, I'm not sure exactly what the requirements are for, because when I talked to the, not Natsu Krashar, but the other guy in transportation, that there's a possibility that this street could be widened at some point, so that this has to work in the event that sidewalks were ever put in. He said it's not likely, but and all of that can work because we could change the steps and the driveway will be set up so that it will be, the driveway is about at grade now, so it will meet grade even if sidewalks are built.
Okay.
So I think that was really it, that my concerns were some of those conditions that, that I didn't want to get locked into things that might not be
Right.
possible to do.
Yeah, I mean, this rendering sure looks like it softens quite a bit, the landscaping as it matures, but, there's a few minor things that can be done to soften in the interim.
And that, like I said, that was really, my clients are big gardeners, and the studio they're artists too, which is the reason for the studio and the windows up above, so they get daylight there and then they have wall space. But the main thrust of the design is to have the house be darker and sort of hidden behind lots of landscaping to break it up.
Any other questions? Okay. Questions? Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for these renderings. Okay. Any representative of the neighborhood association, government agency, or other incorporated public interest organization, you've got 5 minutes from stating your name.
Thank you, Paul Etcher, Land Use Chair of the Kenema Neighborhood Association. We've brought this up, tried to talk it out in the last neighborhood meeting, and kind of talked out the pluses and minuses. Never had a formal vote on it. So, but the discussions that entailed were trying to minimize the massing, because there were concerns voiced by neighbors that they did not want. There was a perception that what they saw kind of created a great long mass of building starting from 4th going up Blanchard, and they felt that that mass was quite significant. No one had a firm thing. They just said they felt like it was more than there should be. On the front of the building, the redesign along the front, eliminating the split entry, doing what they're doing, this is really quite a win-win, taking it to one-car garage. Everybody seemed to had no negative comments, period, with that part of the redesign. The discussion of a little on the roof design, there's not a historic amounts of shed roofs, much was like what you see here throughout the neighborhood. Is that in itself becoming detracting, because it really is adding quite a bold new design over what we have ever seen, even with any of the new construction that went in that is not of any historic nature in any way, shape, or form. So this is a radical change in architectural design from anything that we've ever seen. And then with the massing, it creates a lot more massing. Some have thought that there should have a standard pitch roof, but with the fact that we have artists and they're looking for windows, I guess it can be, somebody can construe. We'd rather have a good neighbor that's happy with their design than somebody that's not happy by somebody trying to dictate something that doesn't make it work for them. But it is something that this shed roof is a factor, and it does create a whole new massing that has a degree of detracting in the neighborhood. But that's up to you people. We didn't have any real consensus. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to testify either in favor or opposition? No. Does the applicant want to come back, or you're good? You want to come back?
The the shed roof was the concern. That we did look at doing a gable roof, but the gable would be running because we're sort of set with the shape of the studio by the rock outcropping and the tree. It's 30 feet wide and 20 feet deep, and we were really stuck, going any deeper. So that's why it's longer facing the street. And then if it had a shed roof or a gable roof, the gable would be the gable would be perpendicular to the street, so you wouldn't see gable ends. You'd see an eave that would be lower, but then we would lose all the light for my clients. I was thinking as we were talking that there's quite a bit of room between the driveway and the steps, that if we were allowed to put a tree in the right of way, I think that would, I'm not sure if we can, but that would break it up quite a bit too. And even without a tree, we can do shrubberies similar to what I sketched there, or even taller.
Do you know if the neighborhood has seen those renderings?
Because I just did them today. So.
Yeah. I think it's with all this plant material that it's significantly looks less massive than the bare bones.
And then the other thing to remember is that tree behind there is
Huge.
50 feet tall or something, so that
kind of dwarfs the house.
if you think of this in the context of that, it's a little different. And the shed, actually, you don't really see, but you'll see the shed a little bit if you were coming down the hill from the end of the garage. So you'll know it's a shed roof, but basically you don't see the slope of the roof.
No, it's shed roof. Okay, thank you. Christina?
Yeah, well, some recommendations.
I had some questions.
Oh, okay.
Can I ask you some questions? Can you? I can't get to the document to show the pictures that you had. Can you get? Yeah, when I go in it, I want to get to the pictures.
Hold.
Well, I was hitting on document.
I can go back
I
to
hit
the
documents.
Is there a specific
And I
photo?
go to staff report.
If it's one of these photos in the PowerPoint, I can tell me which one.
There was one at the White House.
This one right here? Oscar House?
Yeah. I want to know where that is.
Uphill.
Okay, so it's basically behind me if I'm taking the photo. If I'm standing, it's behind me. If you're looking at this photo.
Okay, so
His property is just to your left.
so uphill.
Yep, uphill, right here.
Oh, okay. So I see his house. Can you go to the one where it's full on? Where you had a picture of.
Another one of his house. Now this, this is the house.
Yeah. So at the bottom where the 8 is,
Mm-hmm.
I see that other picture.
Yeah.
The one where it's all of his house.
That's actually looking from Fifth Place, from Fifth Avenue. You're actually at Fifth Avenue here, looking at it. You've gone around the corner from Blanchard. You're now on Fifth.
Gotcha. Okay. Alrighty. Because that's quite large.
Doesn't look at originals of the house either.
No.
Some of the other findings which are in the staff report is kind of distance between that historic house and the kind of large corner setback in the property line. I think also added in the massing issue. It's not, the accessory garage is not abutting this existing historic house. There's a good 30 feet between the historic house and the property line.
Space. And then the other thing I had a question on was, does the city have any policy in place for plant mitigation? In other words, they come up with a plan, there's a certain deposit made to the city.
Could be in our natural resource, but I think the idea for this is that staff level, I will approve a landscaping plan that meets the intent of condition approval number 5.
Yeah, I don't know how much teeth that has.
Right, and so the question is if you would like to make it go farther,
Yeah.
to make sure that the mitigation planting retains, especially what always happens, the intentions of the first owner are great, the intentions of the second and third owner sometimes wane. The applicant could potentially record on their property an easement, or excuse me, a
Conservation easement?
covenant, thank you.
Covenant, yeah.
Conservation covenant, which basically holds them, any future property owner. And we've done this on subdivisions where we've required extra mitigation. The covenant's recorded against the property, so if you want to add that next step with teeth, that can be done as part of this condition of approval where a covenant of the landscaping plan is recorded that requires the property owners or future property owners to maintain the existing landscaping, and if and when landscaping dies or needs to be replaced, with in-kind materials.
Yeah,
So that, I mean, that does happen, and that's something that could be used for this, if you want to
Yeah,
worry
I
about
know.
future property
I mean,
owners.
I've dealt with other jurisdictions where they've required a mitigation of X percentage, 125%. The cost of the plants is deposited to the city, and after 2 years, that amount of money is.
Oh, we're talking about short-term surety. Yeah, I think in this situation, that may not work, because the applicants don't have a firm time of when they're gonna
Well, it goes along with that. It's not like, hey, by June of this year, they're going to have it. It basically goes along with construction from when the permit's issued. They've got X amount of months to complete and get the landscape plan in. And that's usually at finish. They've got X amount of months to get that plan in, and they have to deliver to the city some sort of a landscaping plant list that has the costs and then a certain amounts deposited to the city. That after 2 years after inspection, and percentage is not died off, they get that money back. And I don't know if the city has anything like
We
that.
do that in regards to some commercial projects. It's generally related more towards street trees and subdivisions and during our civil issues. We haven't done that as much through site plan design review for landscaping plans. What we've generally done is they have to be done before the occupancy permit is given. And then we send them through code enforcement over time. Though we have found that the covenants work well in the long run,
Right.
because in future property owners, I'm not worried as much about the first year or two. Based on this condition of approval, once they approve a landscape plan, if I work with them and get a landscape plan I think meets the intent of number 5, it'll be approved.
Can you go to those conditions,
Yeah.
please?
That'll be approved, and if the board feels you need to give another sentence or two direction, that's fantastic. I'd approve a landscape plan, and then they'd have 6 months from the certificate of occupancy once they move in to finalize it, and then I can send them to municipal court for failure to install it. So I have that authority. But generally, once it's installed per an approved plan, that's usually okay. It's year 5 and year 6 that, I know in commercial developments we worry about.
Right.
It's not, it doesn't survive, or, so they move and a new property owner comes in and cuts everything down. That's generally what we have trouble with.
Yeah, I think if it was more of a real public right away,
Oh, but the public right now, that's a good question, because any work they do, any planting they do inside the public right of way as a mitigation will go through a right of way permit.
Right, but I'm just saying, this isn't a busy street. It's not where it's very view oriented. People are driving by. It's a side street. It doesn't, and it's on the side. It doesn't see a lot. But I agree that would probably be sufficient. I don't agree with number 7. I think it can be scratched personally. 6 as well. Jen makes a great point from the street level. You'll never see that.
And that's why I did put 6 and 7. I knew they were restricting a little bit, but I wanted to have that larger conversation with the board.
Yeah.
I think those issues were there, and I think they might need to be addressed based on the board's discretion.
Yeah, and back to number 5, I don't know how much teeth the code enforcement has.
As much force as I want.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
I think it's all about the approved landscape plan.
yeah. And I think there has to be, if we implement this with number 5, that there's got to be inspection on it or something. So it's not last second.
Well, one thing we can say is,
I mean, there's also issues of depending on if they plant trees, the size of caliper, the size of containers that are going in. We're not talking little gallon things, you know.
right, well, I think what we say that shrubs chosen to conceal exposed concrete shall be installed at a minimum height of 2 feet. The landscape related to this condition shall be installed within 6 months. So one thing we can be more specific and write and say prior to obtaining a certificate of occupancy.
Well, technically, they don't need a certificate of occupancy.
Look for the a building final. How's that?
Yeah, building final.
For prior to obtaining a building final, the applicant shall submit and gain approval of the proposed landscaping plan by staff. The landscape plan shall be installed within 6 months of building final. And if you're really worried, I mean, we can put a requirement of, we could do is, we've done it where if they want to do it before building final, at the time of building final,
Well, that's my next
there's
question.
no money. And then if they want to do it after building final, they put up 100%, 150%, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Because there's they could do it, you know,
You get
before
option
the
A or
final.
option B.
Yeah, that would be great because there's a good chance they could get it in before the final. That's great.
Mhm.
But if they want to do it after, there's got to be something like that. You know?
Okay. So 2, if they want to, so the applicant shall post landscape by staff. The landscaping per approved plan shall be installed prior to obtaining a building file or within 6 months of building approval. The city shall the city shall obtain surety to 115% of the projected or the approved plant list.
I don't have any other questions. I didn't need.
So you can strike 6 and 7 and just
Yeah.
the revised condition number 5.
Does someone want to make a motion or?
I would move for approval of HR 1101, subject to conditions 1 through 4 as written and 5 as amended.
Great job. I finished.
Ms. Toll?
Aye.
Mr. Basinger?
Aye.
Chair McLaughlin?
Aye.
The motion passes 3-0.
Thank you. You know, can I ask you a question? Minutes. Are we supposed to be doing those?
Yes. We will be having a big bunch of minutes. We were put up behind the Planning Commission in priority by our minute taker, and she's promised me in her email that you will have a lot of minutes to look over.
I will promise you that I will only take a minute. As long as we keep it legal.
I will remember.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for dinner.